So welcome everybody to week 3 of Quality Tasks. With this coach certification journey, we're super excited to deepen our thinking a little bit further into how we can look for alignment when we're looking at tasks and a focus cluster, and starting to think about the coaching aspect of how we can provide some different pieces of feedback to support people in this process. Because ultimately the goals for you are to build that good to go or exemplary task, right? And then to also share this knowledge and support others as they're going through the process. So those are two things we're going to continue to kind of bring up and highlight during this session especially, and really start thinking of how we can use some of LDC's resources like the task pitfall checklist and that curriculum alignment rubric that you had some exposure to in our in-person days, and using that to help you support and coach others to quality. So with that, we always like to start with our syllabus. So I'm going to take us into core tools. And if you haven't pulled up those tabs yet, go ahead and do that now. We always want to make sure you have that syllabus pulled up with the leader tab as well as your learner tab. So I will start us there while you get yours set up on your end. And so this was for week 2. Let's move past. We'll reflect on our learning from this session in just a moment. But the goal of today is really to, again, identify alignment in a task. So how do we know what those look-fors are? How do we know how to support conversations and facilitate conversations of others when we're thinking about alignment in a task? And today we're going to show you a few fun things that will help you and other people as they're going through this process kind of map out their journey by looking at snapshots of how you can kind of freeze your module in one place and then make some changes, maybe go back to the old snapshot to see if that one supports your thinking a little bit better. But it kind of, again, offers that opportunity for you guys to have a lot of those thinking points and decisions as you're building these tasks. We're also going to use the breakout groups. We're going to get into 2 larger groups. One will be with Monique and one will be with myself. And we're going to take a look at those starter tasks again, but really in the lens of using our task pitfall protocol list as well as the curriculum alignment rubric to help start providing feedback. So we're going to show you a few tricks of the trade of how you can support this, and what we'll do in the breakout rooms will support what we'll have you guys do with a partner in your asynchronous learning over the next week. So we'll also take a deeper look at that pitfall review, practice modeling for you how to have a thinking partner, what types of conversations you could be having around the resources that we'll provide. And then we're also going to talk about sharing your module with your partner that you'll be working with over the next week to make sure you guys have access to one another's modules to provide that feedback. Does that sound good for everybody? All right. I know it's early. I know it's Friday. We're all probably feeling the same way, but we always like to start with the syllabus because it really helps frame the thinking that we're going to be doing together over this session, as well as what we can look forward to over the next week. So with that, I'm going to stop my share just for a moment. And as we like to get you involved when you first kind of log in and reorient yourself to these different sessions that we have, I'd like for you to think about last week's session, as well as the process and learning that you've had over the last 7 days since we saw you last. Think about, as you were designing your task and working on making some of those changes and those decisions, what resources would you say were the most beneficial and helpful to you in that process? What was most useful in helping design your task this past week? You can go ahead and unmute or post that in the chat. We'll spend a few minutes making sure everybody has an opportunity to reflect, and then we'll move into our learning for the day. And I hope you're taking a minute to read through some of these other responses. I'm seeing a lot around the standards, which is fantastic. That's what this is all about, right? Trying to use the standards in these design decisions and making those your focal point and your guiding light as you're developing your task. I also saw some people writing about how filling in some of the starter tasks or using those task templates really helps support their thinking and taking that standards and then the task and making those connections naturally for them. So I think that's really strong.
I also noticed the sidebar instructions. that when they developed that, that was such a big help to be able to have that sidebar up while your module was up and working through that. So I appreciate that comment.
I think it's good that you called that out, because I feel like when we're in this learning environment, you guys are kind of wearing two hats, right? You're learning from us, but we're learning from each other. And then you're going to take this experience and hopefully relay this with some of the teachers you're supporting. And so remembering that the sidebar instructions are there help you as a coach support the people that you're working with when you're running those PLC meetings. I always like to have a guide, so I remember what I'm supposed to be doing, and having it written down there for us is really helpful. All right, well, thanks for sharing. We're going to go ahead and show you how you can make snapshots of your module as you're going through this design process. So I'm going to hand it over to Monique, and then we'll continue on our journey this morning.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and kind of walk us through how to create a snapshot. And so I'm going to start in my library in Core Tools. And, you know, last week we were working on this Cohort D, we were working on the bus integration. So I'm going to pull that module up and talk through. I was thinking about the changes we made, but I really want to say the initial work we did before I go in and change anything. So I can go up to this More Options button, and I can create a snapshot. When I click on that Create Snapshot, it asks me if I really want to do that, and tells me that it's a read-only version of the module. So I'm not going to be able to make changes on it, but that's okay, because I'm going to show you how I can if I decide to use that. So I'm going to create it, and it's going to spin. All right, so now it tells me I'm successful. I want to go to that snapshot. And what happens is I come in this snapshot, and notice it says snapshot, and I've played around with this a little bit. So it says snapshot 3. I can click on this blue piece, and I can rename either of my snapshots. So this is snapshot 3. I want to rename it, and I want to say it is my tasks and standards, maybe. So it's the very first one when I wrote my first task and standards, and I'm going to keep that thinking. Now it's changed over. And so then when I go back to my original module, and I open this sidebar, and I don't know if y'all have noticed this, but there's this little arrow over here that can move it so you can jump to wherever you want to within the task. But down here at the bottom, it says I have 2 snapshots. And when I click on that, it pulls up the 2 different ones, that initial one that I created when I was playing around, and then this, task and standards. Well, let's say I don't want this one anymore. I just go to those 3 dots, and I can delete that snapshot. But now I want to go back in here, and I've made changes. I edit this, and I change this to and maybe I've decided I want to change the template, so I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to randomly select something. So I'm going to change it to this, and it clicks up. And I go through and I went, oh, I really wasn't thinking. I like that first version so much better. Well, if I go into snapshots, remember it's one that I cannot edit, right? But I can go here. Oops, I can go on these 3 dots, and I can copy the snapshot. And when I copy it, it becomes a module again. Now, word of warning, when you copy it, if you don't change the name, you might get confused, because then you'll have 2 Cohort D in there. So make sure you change, once you go to your copy, you adjust the name. Even though this tells me that I copied it from my original, this will just let me change the copy. So that was kind of quick, but are there any questions? Anybody have any questions? All right, cool. Heather, I'm going to send it back to you.
All right. So I think that tool is really functional because over the next 8 weeks, you'll find yourself making some different decisions and editing your template or editing your task once you have that thinking partner coming to you and kind of asking you some questions to promote some deeper thinking. And instead of losing all your work, you can save it in those snapshots. So I think that's really important. With that, we are going to kind of get into the meat of this session, which is really looking for quality and alignment when we're thinking about tasks. So I'm going to have Monique share a link in the chat of our starter task collection. And this is a collection we asked you to review after week 1 in your asynchronous work. We had, I believe, the Rankin collection, the starter task collection, and the Stevenson collection. And they're just big groups of different modules that are listed there. So for the purpose of today, we're going to use the starter tasks that are in the collection that was just shared in the chat to kind of guide some decisions and thinking when we're using the curriculum alignment rubric as well as our task pitfall list. So I'm going to show you just briefly what it should look like on your screen once you pull it up. When you click on the links of the starter tasks, you'll be able to see that these are broken down into grade level bands or focus kind of collections, I guess. And so this example is all secondary ELA. I have secondary social studies, secondary science starter tasks. We have some elementary there as well. I know we have elementary folks in this group, science, ELA, and social studies. So with that, we're going to be using some of these starter tasks in our breakout sessions. You can tell how many modules are in each of these. Once you click on it, it will break it down by the standards that are being used just to help you as you're kind of perusing through this in the future or helping others use these groups or these collections in their design. And so we are going to think a little bit deeply about what these tasks look like and keeping in mind that each of these in these groups are already rated good to go or exemplary. Okay, so you can already assume that these are good starting points, which is why we have them clumped together in a starter task collection. This is a great starting point for people that are developing new tasks, people that can come in and edit, or even your thinking, just to help refine kind of what quality looks like. So I'm going to go through a few different thinking points that we have when we're looking at a starter task. And would you mind just sharing, is this big enough or large enough on your screen? Or should I try and blow this up a little bit more? It's okay? Okay. So when we're thinking about starter tasks, we're thinking all about discipline specific. So always focusing on your content standard first. And you have these annotated task examples that can be adapted by switching out some different pieces of them. Sometimes that's just starting with having a teacher switch out the text because you know that the text offered in that starter task might not be one that they're using in their classroom. But these are tasks that already have your standards built in. Your reading standards are already working to kind of amplify the other standards that are the focus in that cluster. And it helps give educators that like confidence piece when they're starting to develop new tasks, and also just to recognize what a good task looks like. Sometimes starter tasks can be used in a PLC to just look at it like we're going to today and say, what's great about this? What do you think benefits students? What do you think can benefit you? And helping support those conversations. So starter tasks are unique because, again, they're streamlined already with that task design, taking a focus cluster that automatically supports the task and the thinking that students will be doing. And so from any starter task we have in this collection, you can pick it up essentially and go use it in your classroom immediately. Now, again, changing out some of those decision points of what the text looked like, you could change what the product looks like. You can update one of the content standards if it's not perfectly supporting, but it's similar in nature. And so keeping in mind how useful these are as you are learning yourself and then supporting others is really valuable. It's all about helping teachers kind of make important design decisions, but not all of the design decisions at one time. Does that make sense? They can go really, really deep into finding a text that can support a task instead of thinking about how to design a task altogether at once. And so here we've seen this star before in some of the courses, and I think we even looked at this when we were together in our in-person days for that coach kickoff, but you have multiple entry points when you're thinking about designing your tasks. We have that focus cluster, we have our texts, what will your student writing product look like, thinking about how your standards are supported by a specific template, and then thinking about the disciplinary content and whether or not the starter task you're choosing or the template you're choosing is really supporting your discipline authentically. Some different design points that you get to make in this process. We always bring up this kind of bench here, or this little visual to help remind us that we always want to start with that content standard. We know that teachers hopefully feel very strong in their content that they teach. It's sometimes determining how to support reading and writing authentically that can be that extra thinking point and can raise the rigor for students. So we bring up this image often just to keep reminding you that we have that three-legged stool, and it's all about that focus cluster supporting one another to promote deep thinking that's authentic to the discipline. And so here's a quick example of an upper elementary ELA task. You can see that our focus standard for reading is RL3. This is a 4th grade ELA example. And take a minute to read that, and we'll talk about it. Okay, so I'm seeing, it's funny watching your eyes to figure out whether they're finished reading or not. But as you're looking at this, you can see there's a few different areas where authors could come in and take out maybe literary analysis. They're not prepared to do that with their students yet. So you could choose a different type of product for students. You could change the fact that this is chapter 7 of Phineas L. McGuire Gets Slimed, because maybe that's not something your students are reading, but you could pick a book that you know that you do every year that could support students in this same type of design. You'll also notice this italicized sentence at the end: include examples of the author's use of speech style and figurative language to convey your message to readers. This is an additional demand. So I'm going to show you just how that was decided and what that looks like when we're, again, making the connections to the standards using these tasks. So this is that same task, but we've now broken it down by our reading standard as well as our language standard. You can see how the author naturally used language in a natural way to support the thinking of students. We have our blue supporting conveying the character's traits to the reader, which is really the heart of R3, describing in depth a character. I want to make sure my students understand how to convey the character traits, or how the author conveyed character traits in this book or in this particular section. The author also decided to use specific details in the text. So how will students show that the author conveyed these character traits? Oh, they're going to use one character's thoughts, words, or actions. Finally, in this additional demand that the author decided to add to really lift the thinking for students, we have understanding of figurative language. So now students have to know when they're going in after seeing this task to read chapter 7, they're going to focus on how the author describes a character based on the character's thoughts, words, and actions, and they have to include the author's use of speech style and figurative language. So they're taking that extra lens to go a little bit deeper and understanding how the author is using a particular language to support the thinking, right, of that character. This additional demand down here is really just something that adds an extra kind of oomph, for lack of better words, to your task. You do not have to have additional demands on the end of your task. The way the templates are set up should already support the type of thinking your students should have. But sometimes a demand is necessary to make sure that you're really getting to the heart of which portion of that standard you want students to focus on. And in this case, it's helping students know that they have to really focus on that speech style and figurative language. So here's another example, and this just shows you the many different design decisions that you get to make as you're going through this process, as well as supporting others through. So this one is an 8th grade ELA task, and basically these 6 different pieces down here are placed into different colors to show you the different decisions that could be made. So your text could be changed out. That's a thinking point that you have to have, which text will my students be using? Our writing product was chosen as an essay, but if that's not something you wanted your students to do in your class, you could think of a different writing product. Your cognitive demand here is explain. That's when we're choosing the template and thinking about what we want our students to actually do with this knowledge that we're hoping they gain. What's your content? In this case, it's an ELA. We want them to reveal aspects of a character over the course of the text. You can see our focus standard of RL3 listed there. How are they going to do that? Through pivotal lines in that story, and thinking about the multiple responses that students could have. So having of your choosing at the end will make sure that you're not kind of pinpointing them so deeply that they can't talk about something that they found that could support Charlie's character over the course of the text. So it's keeping in mind that we want to be specific, but not too specific in this case. Questions about that so far? Hopefully this is helping us just kind of reorient to looking at these all together. All right, so I feel like we talked about this. I'm going to skip through these a little bit. And here's an elementary social studies example. Let's look at middle school science. So after reading several informational texts on climate change, write a research summary in which you compare each text's conclusions about the role of human industrial activity in climate change. Support your discussion with evidence from the text. Include a summary of each text's central idea in your response. So here we can find the author specifically started with central ideas and conclusions of a text. That's our reading standard, right? They need to be able to do that every single time they're reading. What's the central idea of this? What can I take away from this text? And they also wanted their students to provide the accurate summary of the text. Just note mentally how the author continues making those connections for students to make this task very specific for them so they know exactly what to do when they're getting to their work. You can also see it supported by thinking of quantitative and technical information. So how your focus cluster is ordered is important because it shows us as teachers or other people who are looking at your module what you're holding most valuable. And it should be your content, then thinking about your reading standard. We're just showing you how the reading standard is supported here. Does that make sense? Okay. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and take us into our breakout rooms. So in a moment, you'll see something pop up. It'll take you into your breakout room. Some of you will be with me, some of you will be with Monique. And we're gonna reorient our thinking to looking at the task pitfalls as well as using the curriculum alignment rubric to dive deeper into some of those starter tasks that we started with a few minutes ago. You guys ready? All right, awesome. Let's see if we can get this to function. All right.
This is always the moment of truth. Will the breakout groups do what we want them to do? So we'll see you guys in breakout groups.
Hopefully. All right, here we go. Yay, it worked. All right. Lovely to see you. It's nice to have a smaller kind of Brady Bunch window so I can actually see your faces. When there's 20 or more, you have to kind of scroll through the pages to see everybody. All right, so I love breakout rooms because it gives us an opportunity to get a little bit more intimate as far as not feeling like we have to talk in front of 20 people, but really giving you more of a voice in our thinking process. So that's what I'm hoping we'll find over the next kind of 15 minutes or so. So with that, I do want to share a document with you. And this is something that we used together when we were in our in-person kickoff. It's that curriculum alignment rubric, and it starts with the task pitfall list. So I'm going to share that in the chat for you. Just let me know when you get that. You guys able to open that? Okay. Oh, and you have your hard copy. Love it. I know, I'm such a paper person. I still print everything. I don't know, I can't get out of it, but that's another story. I'll stay focused. Okay, so we took a look at, I'm going to share it just so I have it and we can talk about it together as well. We took a look at this pitfall checklist for a few different reasons. We started by looking at some work in progress tasks to figure out what didn't really work or click. And then we started to move into what makes tasks good to go and what makes them exemplary. You guys also had that opportunity to walk around and look at some different examples to try and pinpoint which pitfall was supported by the different tasks. If you notice when you scroll down under these pitfalls, we're going to be looking at how to use the LDC task scoring guide, which is really just the first few pages of this document. And so since you know starter tasks are already good to go or exemplary, your goal today is to think about what makes these starter tasks good to go or exemplary. So thinking about what indicators here could be supported in either of these columns. We're not going to be traveling into the work in progress column today because we just want to focus on what's really great and what's working. Does that sound good for you guys? We in agreement there? All right, so what I did, and feel free to do the same or just follow along on my screen. I went into those starter tasks that we had shared the link for before the slideshow, and I picked 2 of them that we could just talk about. And so this is an ELA example. The next one that we'll do is, I believe, a science example. And so we're going to start here and just walk through some of the thinking that you could be doing as you're supporting others. I had mentioned kind of briefly that part of your asynchronous work this week will be to provide some feedback to a partner. So what you'll also see me doing is using these comment bubbles here to the right to write some feedback to my partner based on what I'm noticing with that curriculum alignment rubric and the task pitfall checklist. Does that sound doable for everybody? So whatever steps I'm doing are things that you'll be doing with your partner. Oops, I didn't mean to click that. You guys will probably do this too. So I am actually modeling what it looks like sometimes. So in this case, we have our overview. This is letting us know the focus of this starter task is RL4. Again, it's reminding you how you could edit it to make it specific to you. And you, again, should have these conversations with teachers when you're meeting with them. You guys don't have to use this same text. You can use a text that you're already using in your classroom. This is just offering a deeper thinking opportunity for students supported by a task itself. Once you make a copy of this and start editing it, you can delete any part of this that doesn't make sense to you. Doesn't matter for you. So in this case, middle school students analyzed the classic short story, The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. After multiple readings of the text, so we already know what they're going to be reading, that they're going to be reading it multiple times, students apply their understanding of literary elements to analyze Jackson's story in a Paideia seminar. Then students write an analysis of the impact of Jackson's word choice on the tone of the lottery. Okay, so this was the teacher's opportunity to share exactly what they're going to be doing, what types of moves he or she is going to do to support the thinking, and then what students will have to do as that final product comes to mind. So let's take a look at the task. There, now it's finally loading. So here the author used IE4, informational and explanatory. How does Shirley Jackson's choice of words and phrases in the lottery affect the tone of the story? After reading The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, write a literary analysis in which you analyze the impact of word choice on the story's tone. Support your discussion with evidence from the text. Here's that demand they decided to include. Include multiple key examples from the text in your responses. So far, I've taken a look at the task. Let's scroll down to those standards and see how it's supported there. We're using RL 6.4, determining the meaning of words and phrases. I saw that referenced here. We asked them to think about the impact of word choice, okay? We also wanted them to cite evidence. Ooh, maybe that's why they added that additional demand, including multiple key examples from the text. You're gonna have to really cite your evidence from the text. And we can see the lottery here is also added just to make sure we can all take a look at that text. For the purpose of time today, we're not gonna actually move into that, but just to recall that all of those things should be there. So when you're thinking about your curriculum alignment rubric, we have these different kind of areas that we're looking for. We look for good to go or exemplary indicators in content and literacy skills. We also look for good to go and exemplary indicators in the clarity and coherence. Is it a clearly written task? Why? What makes it clear? And then finally, the text, we said we'll kind of work around. We're not actually going to go into that one, but they should be listed there. That's something you should comment on for them. And then looking at the writing product to determine whether or not this is something that's authentic for the discipline to support the thinking you want your students to be doing. So make sure you have this curriculum alignment rubric pulled up on your page. And I just want to provide us an opportunity to go through this together and provide some feedback to this author. So let's say this was your partner's module that they've shared with you so far. And we've taken a look at the focus standards. We've also taken a look at the task template here. After reading that together, what are some good to go or exemplary indicators that are standing out to you? And since we are a small group, I'd love for you to unmute and share something that's standing out to you rather than use the chat.
There is language from the standard that is directly into the task.
Can you give me an example?
Where it says analyze the impact of word choice on the story's tone. If you look at the focus standard, it uses those same words, specific word choice and tone.
Perfect. Analyze word choice and tone. So here I'm writing a comment to the author saying, hey, kudos to you. I can see evidence of the standards language directly in the task itself. Here's an example of how you've done that really nicely. What's something else that makes this good to go or exemplary?
The task is definitely text dependent.
Perfect. They cannot answer this without going into it because they have to look for what the author's moves were and support that in their writing, right? It's not their own ideas in this case. It's how the author's using words and phrases to develop or create and support that tone. What else?
The additional statement of include multiple key examples from the text in your response. It's not confusing or distracting from the purpose of the prompt. It just enhances that.
Yes. Sometimes people feel like they need to put demands after the task to make it really clear, but it turns into this include a bibliography or something kind of random that you could still add into your instruction, right, when you're going through this task, but doesn't necessarily have to be located there. In this case, it fits really nicely. It's not confusing. It's not guiding them away from the purpose. In fact, it's letting them know, hey, don't just choose one example, choose a couple, which also helps deepen their understanding of tone itself, right? Tone is something that should be reflected throughout the book. It's not a one-time, one scenario example. Awesome. Anything else?
There's 2 to 4 focus standards.
I see you have chosen 2 to 4 focus standards that help amplify thinking for students. And I'll go ahead and call this out because I know that we've talked about this before and it's kind of just something I have to do. We don't usually have people choose R1, this example here, as a focus standard. And I purposefully chose this example to have this conversation because really students should be citing evidence that support their thinking and developing inferences every time they're reading. So you could have this in your set of standards, but we usually don't ask people to choose R1 or R10 as a focus standard. That R10 was reading on grade level. So we know that that's something we want students to get to, but maybe isn't a specific focus standard. I think you could use a language standard here to further support the tone because that's what they're looking for. And so thinking about, again, how a teacher could pick this up and make it specific to their classroom, and what those decision points are, could help you as a coach too in supporting and facilitating those conversations. In this case, you don't have to read the lottery. You could pick another book and have them analyze the choices of the words and phrases, right? make it specific to them so teachers aren't feeling like this is an added thing they have to do, and instead it's just deeply supporting the work you're already doing and making this an opportunity for students to go really, really deep into this standard of thinking about words and phrases and how authors use them. You want to look at the other one? All right. Let's pop over to this science example. This one is examining cause and effect of a complex phenomenon. Again, any of this is editable to make it specific to you, but this one is really referencing the colony collapse disorder, and that's with honeybees, right, and honeybee colonies. So it gives you a little bit of background information here about how the honeybee populations have changed over time, what factors have been investigated to try and determine what's happening with this, what can we do to help figure out scientifically what's going on to better support these honeybees, because we know they're so valuable in our environment. This one also gives you information to let you know it blended a specific set of core standards with the next generation science standards. But if this is something that your teachers could do in science, again, all they have to do is switch out that Pennsylvania core standard and make it something that's your Kentucky science standard, right? It's an easy fix, doesn't take very long. And then moving into the real thinking of this biology course. So here's our task. We have IE6, informational or explanatory. After reading informational texts on the colony collapse disorder, write an informative article for Scientific American magazine in which you examine the causes of CCD, that colony collapse disorder, and explain the effects of CCD on one aspect of society, such as local food production, human health, or the environment. Support your discussion with evidence from the texts. Here's that additional demand. Include charts, tables, and/or illustrations to help you convey your message to your readers. So again, quick conversation. We'll move a little bit faster through this one. Let's take a look at the standards quickly, and then we'll think about what makes this good to go or exemplary based on those indicators. So here we have our academic standard. This is such a huge science standard and such a great example of what our science teachers deal with. Explain the mechanisms of biological evolution. That's massive, right? So many different ways you can teach this. And so sometimes when these standards are provided for us, it's difficult to help teachers determine like, well, that is such a big standard. How do I know what to focus on in biological evolution? There's so many different mechanisms of it. And so this is one way or one task that could be used to deeply support that standard. We also have our reading standards here, determining the central ideas or conclusions, translating our quantitative or technical information expressed in words into that visual form. So that's why they have that additional demand of using charts, tables, graphs. And of course, they're going to write an informative or explanatory text for that Scientific American magazine. You have multiple texts here too that I wanted to point out. We have a CCD overview, there's a TED Talk, there's an annual report, and a Harvard Bee study. So I noticed right away something really valuable and strong about this task is that exactly. They have multiple entry points with different texts to make sure that students are not being led to believe one thing because they're reading it in one place, they're listening to it from another author or from somebody else, they're reading it from this other link, and then you have this Harvard Bee study. So they have multiple different texts to access as they're trying to go through this thinking and coming up with then the other option that they have of which aspect they want to focus on. Students don't have to explain all of these: local food production, human health, or the environment. In fact, they can just choose one after going through those texts, which one stands out the most to them, going back through the text again, determining how they can support the thinking of one of those aspects. So I think this is a really valuable starter task because it has a lot of decisions for students as well as for teachers. And it just gives a nice example of what this could actually look like in a classroom. If you didn't want them writing an article for the Scientific American magazine, again, if that's not your thing and the science teacher didn't want to make that decision, you could choose another product that's authentic to science. Okay. Anyone who did not speak up in our last one, let's come up with one or two comments that we could have just because we're all going to have to do this with our partner. What is good to go or exemplary about this based on that curriculum alignment rubric?
I thought the prompt was pretty focused, where it's talking about an effect on an aspect of society. Like that could be really broad, but then it goes on to say local food production, human health, or whatever. So it's really focused, and it would help the students stay a little more focused and be on task quicker, maybe.
Absolutely. Perfect. The prompt is focused. Yeah, if you just said explain one aspect of society, oof, a little overwhelming. But if you give them some options, oh, okay, cool, food production. I can make that connection to make it authentic to me. Thank you. Anybody else?
From a science background, I know that the skills for science, they're targeting basic skills, and that's foundational to their understanding of the content. So it's really connected to that, with that the skill that they're asking them to do.
I thought the writing product was authentic to the discipline of science, to write an article.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We read articles all the time in science, right?
Mm-hmm.
So shouldn't students learn how to write them after reading them instead of always having us, write an essay? There's a time and a place for that.
Well, and I liked that additional, that they could add charts and tables to convey their message.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, I want to make sure I took us everywhere we needed to go in here. And we did. So I'm going to pull us back to whole group. We'll kind of debrief quickly and see what the other group talked about, and then move into what our asynchronous learning will look like over this next week. Make sure you have your partner list as well, so you're prepared and we're good to go. But thank you for your thinking. I hope this helped you recognize what quality looks like and gave you some access points of how to provide feedback to your partners and practice that skill. So we're gonna close our rooms. All right, I'm gonna head back to that main session. I'll see you guys there. Hello.
Hey, we got pulled back, and oh, I'm not seeing everybody all of a sudden. Oh, there you are. Rebecca, would you continue, if that's okay, Heather, would you continue what you were saying? Because that was really, we were talking about the ELA, Martin Luther King's speech and the Kennedy speech and how tone was. And I'm going to share that so the people from the other group can see.
Perfect.
But would you finish what you were saying, Rebecca? Because that was awesome.
Okay, I was pretty much finished anyway, but what I was saying was that in talking about the tone and having the kids develop the author's tone, you may have to do a mini lesson prior to that to really have them understand what tone means, because of that specific age group. They misinterpret tone a lot. They don't understand things such as sarcasm and things like that at that kind of age. So you kind of have to go back and reteach that, or teach that before I think you would do that task.
And I love that you were saying that, because you're right. That's something, once you develop these, you really have to think about what skills are going to be represented in your ladder, and we'll deal with that later. But would this help students understand tone at a deeper level than we normally push them to in that grade level? And that's, to me, the sign of a really good starter task and a great starting point. So that's it. Thank you.
No, of course. And I'm sorry I didn't give you much of a warning. I was just like, okay, we're going back in 60 seconds. So I'm glad you had the opportunity to finish that conversation. Since we were in separate groups, let's have a quick debrief and just think about how you think these starter tasks could support teachers that you're working with, or maybe what stood out to you in your conversation in your group. So we'll have one or two people share and then move into our next piece. So how do you think these starter tasks can support the teachers that you're working with? Or what is something that's resonating with you and standing out from the conversations you just had? Please unmute.
It gives you a model to follow. You're not starting from the ground without any model to look at.
That's so powerful. I totally agree, especially knowing these are already rated modules. you already know it's a good to go or an exemplary. So using these to guide your conversations with teachers and help support them create theirs will already help them feel successful as well as you feel successful as a coach. We'll have one or two more share and then we'll move on.
I think really using that curriculum alignment rubric with the tasks to share with the teachers so they can kind of see how using that rubric will help them in the future as far as the tasks that they're looking at using and designing.
Thanks, Sabrina. I like that you also referenced that, I mean, all teachers likely are developing some sort of task in their classroom that they want students to do, but even having that curriculum alignment rubric available for them to do a quick check through, like, ooh, is my content clear? Am I clearly stating what I'm asking students to do? Are my texts included and valuable? Is my writing product authentic to the discipline? Those 4 quick checks in developing any task will help improve their practice and their thinking, right? So I love that you made that connection. Okay, so it's 9:50. We have a few minutes just to go into one of our courses and show you what your asynchronous work will look like. And there's some different steps that we'll be doing in this process. So I wanted to make sure we saved a little bit of time at the end to make sure it's clear and we're comfortable as well. So first I'm going to take us to, I'm going to share my screen quickly, our instructional cycle. Oh, where am I? Here I am. For session 4, this is that instructional cycle 1 in design that you guys have been going through. Last week you focused on session 3. This week we'll focus on going through session 4. And so though we did not use this really as a starting point for our conversations, you can naturally see the connection between the work that we did in our breakout sessions and the conversations that we held together and how it supports that deep competency focus of using that task pitfalls checklist or that LDC curriculum alignment rubric to provide feedback to others. So session 4 is all about that, whether you needed a refresher or you just wanted to read back through it before you actually went through your work. You'll notice some different design tips here to help you as you're continuing to refine your task and your decisions that you're making each week. We have that overview of task pitfalls that you can go through or use to support others as you're thinking about this. And then we have some action items. And this is what's most important for the session for your asynchronous work this week. So your action items are going to ask you to go through the task pitfalls check, which once you click there, it will again pull up your wonderful directions sidebar to see whether your task and template match, to see whether your texts are functioning, and to go through some of those thinking steps that we had together. Now, though we do want you to do this for your own task, we also think this is a great time to start getting oriented to providing feedback and working with other people. Sometimes that collaboration will help deepen your thinking by asking questions that possibly you hadn't considered, or noticing something that maybe you did not pick up on as you were designing your task yourself. So as you go through these action items, you're going to be having these same thoughts about your task as well as a partner's task that they will share with you. And just like we modeled for you in those breakout session groups, you'll be using the comment bubbles to write them some feedback based on what you're seeing using those resources. Finally, it'll ask you to look at your colleagues or your partner's example and come up with what you found in what they found in your task, and document that as well. So you'll be doing some really deep thinking about your task as well as deep thinking about somebody else's, and then taking their feedback into consideration. Does that make sense so far? Questions so far? This one's a little bit more technical.
And Heather, I did not model that. I got caught up in the discussion and did not model that. So if anyone would like us to show you real quickly how to do the comment bubbles, we can do that right at the end.
Yep, so what we can do is, I'll just show us how to do it in a minute. Thanks for pointing that out. So we'll ask you to actually complete session 4. When you keep going down, it will also ask you to do a self-review using that curriculum alignment rubric. Now, we showed you how to create a review, but I want to model that for you again. And since some of us know how to create comment bubbles and some of us are maybe not sure yet, we'll just show you how to do both of these before we do our final word web for the day. Does that sound doable for everybody? Okay. So I'm going to go to my, let's say this is my task, okay? And I wanted to make sure that Monique could give me feedback because she's my feedback partner. So I'm gonna click on this red more options, which everybody has in their task. And I'm going to go to collaboration settings here. This is how I'm gonna share it with my partner first because I want them to be able to see my module. So a window like this will pop up and I'm gonna add here that I want Monique, where are you?
Type the W, otherwise it,
Okay.
yeah.
See, I'm doing the same thing you guys are gonna do. Monique will be my partner and I want her to comment, but I also want her to be able to create a review at some point of my module, right? Because we're gonna be working together over the next couple weeks as partners to really deepen our thinking. So I've added her name here. I've changed the access to review. I'm not gonna notify her by email because she's on this call, but I also know she's my partner and she knows she's my partner. And then I'll go to submit. So now Monique is able to see my task in her library under that shared with me column. So the second thing we wanted to show you here is, or the other thing we wanted to show you is how to add some comments. You'll have these comment bubbles available. If you shared it the way that we asked you to with the Can Review, you should be able to comment as well. And so anywhere you're going through their task where you want to provide some feedback based on the task pitfalls, based on the curriculum alignment rubric, you would choose a few pieces here to either comment on the task itself. You could write comment bubbles here on the focus cluster, whether or not you feel like the content and literacy skills are really authentically supporting one another. And you literally just type in whatever your statement is and comment. Okay, now I can see Monique is also on my task. If you guys have problems with sharing it or accessing each other's, just let us know. The second thing I wanted to show you how to do is create the review because you're going to be reviewing your own task this week. You're not going to do a full review on your partner's task yet. You're just going to give them some feedback in the comment bubbles based on the curriculum alignment rubric. But for your own review, which is mapped out nicely in session 4 that I just showed you, you'll pull up your module, you'll go to more options, and then scroll down to create review. Am I sure I want to do that? Yes, I am. And what you'll notice is that curriculum alignment rubric, the same one that we just looked at together, popping up here. And you have each of those different domains and sections here just based on the teaching task. So you'll do this for your own task after you've given feedback and received feedback from your partner. Are we good with that? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. We are going to send out that partner list before you guys log off so you know who you're working with. So what I would suggest, I'm trying to think of the easiest way to do this. What I would suggest is going into your module and doing the collaboration settings and finding your partner's name. I'm realizing now you might need their last name. So what I'll do is send up a quick follow-up email as soon as we get off this call that has both people's last names to make it a little bit easier for you. Sorry, I didn't provide that in the first place.
You could also send them a quick private chat. Although I'm noticing a couple people have dropped off, so you may, we'll get that list out. But if you want to send them a quick private chat too to share information.
There's multiple ways to do it, absolutely. And if you have any problems or questions in the process, just send us an email and we will try and help you guys out. So I went over the asynchronous work. I didn't necessarily take us back to the syllabus, but it really says complete session 4, which is that one we went through together. Meet with your assigned partner at some point to talk about the pitfalls. That could just be providing feedback in the comment bubbles, or it could be doing some sort of quick Zoom meeting. It's totally up to you. and then revising your task based on any new learnings that you might have. Whew, that was a quick session with a lot of content. It's 9:59, which means we have 1 whole minute to think about your final word whip. So feel free to add something in the chat, something that's resonating with you, something that you're maybe excited about this next week when it comes to the work that we're doing together. But as always, thank you for your time. You can add your final word whip and then log out as you are ready right at 10 o'clock. Oh, yay, things are starting to make sense. I love it. I've totally been there.
And I love the partners. That's my favorite part of this work, is working with other people who I don't know well and getting to know them and thinking their thinking.
Mm-hmm. Also, since some of you are still on here, if anybody needs help linking their module to their instructional cycle, you can stay on for a minute. I'll go ahead and stop recording and we can help model that for you.